Get you on a Kubota cover.
Yeah, he's notes, yeah.
Good evening, council and guests. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And at this time, I'd like to give the opening to Councillor Susan Penner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I reflected on what I wanted to talk about during this council opening, there were no shortage of topics to consider. I could talk about COVID and weigh in on the mistakes that have been made, the decisions that should be made, and the implications of both. I could talk about the plan for opening schools in fall or whether masks should be mandatory. I could talk about the massive federal deficit, the latest ethics scandal by the Trudeau government, or the resignation of Finance Minister Bill Morneau. There are no shortage of topics to discuss, and yet I don't want to talk about any of them. What I want to talk about is hope. The interesting thing about COVID is that all our lives are being impacted at the same time by the same virus. But the fact is, we all have had major disruptions in our lives before. A job loss, an unexpected diagnosis, the death of a loved one, the breakdown of a relationship, and more. And we get through it. It's not easy, but we get through it. And we come out the other side with more compassion, wisdom, and empathy. And we will get through this too. Further, we have a hope and a future that goes beyond this life. As the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:17 and 18, "For our present troubles are small and won't last very long, yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now, rather we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever." That is the real hope we all need right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Penner, for that hopeful opening and just a shift of perspective. Okay, Council, we have the agenda in front of us. I'd like a motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Penner. Any comments?
No comment.
Further? Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Council, we have the minutes of August 4th, 2020, our regular council meeting. They start on page 1. We've all had an opportunity to review. Looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Swagstra, second by Councillor Siemens. Any comments? Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on. Councillor Hebert is enjoying a much-needed holiday with his family. I would like to have a motion to excuse him, if we could. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Siemens. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, Council, it is just a little before 7:35, so we'll go down to number 9, administration to accounts payable. It's in the back of the book. Council, how would you like to, looking for a motion to approve the accounts payable? Councillor Hebert, second by Councillor Penner. Any comments?
Oh, these are the usual expenditures and within the parameters of the city, and no, self-explanatory.
Thank you. Anything further?
Nothing further?
Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. We've got number 9B. We'll take the financial statements ending July 31st, 2020. That's also in the back of the books. Council, how would you like to proceed? Motion to approve?
Yes.
Councillor Swagstra, second by Councillor Siemens. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, we are at 7:35, so we'll go back to the public hearings. We have 6A, the Rezoning By-Law 2152, Re-14 Ellice Avenue. At this time, I will close the council meeting and open the public hearing. Mr. Workington, could you please introduce this file?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an application or a public hearing regarding an application for rezoning under Bylaw 2152 and also an application for variance file V-2020-17 for a property with civic address of 14 Ellice Avenue in Steinbach. The owners of the property and the applicants of the rezoning and the variance are Renee and Johanna Martins, Richard Penner and Carrie Martins. Purpose of bylaw 2152 is to rezone the subject property from RLD, residential low density, to RMD, residential medium density. And the purpose of the variance application is to allow for an overall site width of 71.5 feet, whereas the RMD residential medium density zone requires a minimum of 75 feet. The applicant is proposing to rezone and vary the property in order to construct a multifamily building on the site consisting of 6 units. Notices as required under the Planning Act have been issued. In council's bins, mail bins earlier this afternoon, there was a package containing a petition and several letters of objection that have been forwarded to the city in regards to this application. The city is also in receipt of a letter from Community and Regional Planning indicating their office would not object to the proposed rezoning of this parcel should council choose to approve the application. With respect to review of administration, recommendation is for council to give bylaw 2152 second reading, and subject to the requirements of the Planning Act, and depending on the number of objections that are received, may give this file third reading, and also that this file be subject to the development agreement. Further, for the application related to the variance with respect to the site width, subject to the outcome of the rezoning, recommendation would be that City Council approve that application. However, only once third reading to zoning bylaw 2152 is provided.
Thank you, Mr. Worthing. So, council, we have 2 files here on one property. First, the rezoning and the variance. Will be taking care of the rezoning first, and the variance if the rezoning goes through. So, I would like to ask if the applicant for the rezoning is present today. Would you like to speak? Okay, take the podium, state your name and address, please, because it's all recorded.
Okay, good evening, council. My name is Carrie Martins from 81 Cutlass Drive in Steinbach, and I'm speaking on behalf of my husband here, Rick Penner, and our friends and co-applicants, Renee and Johanna Martins. So as stated, we are applying for a rezoning of 14 Ellice Avenue to change it from its current RLD zoning to RMD zoning, with the intention of constructing a 6-plex property consisting of 2 separate 3-unit, 2-story buildings. And so before the application was submitted, we did do a lot of neighborhood canvassing in the area to seek input from neighbors in regards to the plan. At that time, we had proposed 2 layouts. The proposed plan, which we're presenting today, consisting of 2 3-plex units, as well as a single 3-story 6-plex. And at the time, hearing what the neighborhood had to say, we selected the 2 3-plex layout, as it seems to satisfy more of the expressed concerns from the neighbors. So this layout complies with all of the RMD dimensional standards, with exception to the width of the property, and does not stand out as much as the 3-story plan, which we were considering at the time, as it is 2 smaller buildings and it blends in better with the existing surrounding properties. Just want to mention as well, some of the objections at the time were curb appeal of the property, and that's something we considered when we switched over from the 6-plex plan to the 2 3-plex layout. And so this will be a little bit shorter and not stand out as much as a 6-plex. Also, another concern was privacy in the neighborhood. So we did take that into consideration, and we added on the, patios on the main level. So originally, we were considering balconies with decks, so we switched that over to patios on the main level, which you can see in the plan. And that should be providing a little bit more privacy for the neighbors, which was a concern. Another concern was to keep the existing trees, which we heard from a number of neighbors in the immediate surrounding area. And we are definitely planning on keeping as many trees as we can there as possible. Like, it depends on how things work out, but we will keep as many trees as we can and keep the landscaping as it is if possible. Another concern was the traffic flow, and that's something we can't do a whole lot about traffic flow, but we took that into consideration, and this property is actually the third from the end of Brant Road. So we are anticipating that most of the traffic flow will be heading towards Brant from there. Should not be as congested as the other area of Ellice, which is heading toward Giesbrecht Street. According to CMHC in 2019, the vacancy for rentals in Steinbach was 1.2%, which is the second lowest to Winkler, which is 0.8%. We recognize the need for more rental availability here in Steinbach. If the rezoning is approved, our second application for a minor variance would also need to be approved, as a 75-foot wide yard would be required, and ours is 71.5. We do understand there are a few properties on Ellice that have been previously rezoned to RMD. So in that regard, we feel we are not setting a precedent today. There has been a precedent set already. We've worked with the city planner and sought advice from town council about doing a project in this transitional area of Steinbach, and we feel it would be a great start to transforming this area of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have you just stay at the podium for a minute. Councillor, are there any questions for the applicant? Councillor Swagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned you've talked to a lot of the neighbors and had listened to some of the objections and have tried to mitigate those. Were there neighbors that you talked to that have expressed support for the plan that you're presenting? And if so, like, what type of numbers are we looking at?
There was one fellow that we had full support, and a couple of the other ones were not objecting or supporting, but giving advice, and that's what drove us to make the decision on go with the layout that we had here. So, yeah, I mean, obviously not from what we see in the petition there. It sounds like there's a lot more objection than support there. But
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Siemens.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, how long have you owned the property?
Since February 2020.
So one of the issues has been water in the background. It's a low property, and how do you plan to address that?
I did take a few shots of the yard, and the yard seems to, like the shots I took they're actually higher in the back than in the front, and I imagine that we're gonna have to work with a civil engineer to make sure we're taking control of our water on our property, whether it's gonna be bringing up the yard or retaining walls. We're fully prepared to do whatever it takes to make that site work there. But like you say, we are a low lot already. I think everybody has probably brought their lots up to make sure they're not the lot on the street there. So we did notice in spring, like there was a lot of water sitting in the back there. So bringing it up and taking care of the drainage properly with the civil engineer should take care of all that.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here with questions or wanting to object to this file?
No, this one here. Excuse me.
Oh, okay, take the podium and state your name and address.
Bertha Taves, 15B Ellice Avenue.
Okay, and you're having questions or objections to this file?
Objections, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a very low piece of property. It's a narrow property. He has water problems every year, so he's been pumping water. Where will that water go? Snow removal. We receive lots of snow. Car parking, where will their visitors be parking? There's about, I think, 5 or 7 spots from Brant to the first street. I should have written these down. Also, where will the children play? If they don't have, like, I don't know what their lawn or what their yard would look like for kids. I know there's a playground in the back. And it's a low rental, I understand. A low rental? Affordable, yeah. Affordable rental, so I don't know exactly what that means. I know, looking at some of the other affordable rentals, the reputation does go down sometimes. And another thing, the other lot that has been rezoned, it's wider. It's not as narrow as this one. And the vehicles, there's lots and lots of traffic. And there's no red light there. So it's a long lineup at lunchtime, at supper time. I know there will be a little bit of a change, but it's still the closest to Ellice Avenue, to all the other properties in the back of Ellice there.
Councillor, are there any questions for the objector?
For administration.
For administration, go ahead.
Through you. I'm just wondering about the topic of drainage has come up already a few times. To the administrator over there. Do you foresee that being resolved in the plan? Development plan before they're allowed to build? I'm assuming that's
Yes,
a part of
that's a standard requirement of all redevelopment such as this, where the city's engineering department requires that a drainage plan be provided.
So in theory, the drainage could actually get better or should be better after?
It would be expected that all water generated by the site would drain properly to the public road allowance.
Okay, and
It
then,
all has to drain to the street.
one more question. Is Ellice considered a collector street for traffic?
I will have to check on that.
It's also a bus route. Okay. So another question, would the land in the back be elevated so that the neighbors would be getting more water? Or would the water be drained to the street?
Well, that would come out in the, like, we're not engineers.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be working on that, but our engineer would be working on that because that property cannot put any water onto any other property. It has to take care of its own water and it has to drain to in that area of town. It's a sewer and gutter, like it's a gutter, the curb and gutter and it goes to storm drain. So that's where it's gonna have to go.
And it all has to go to Brant.
Yeah, but Brandt's designed to take it. Go ahead, Mr. Worthington.
Yes, in response to your question, Councillor Penner, Ellice Avenue between Giesbrecht Street and Brant Street is designated as a collector street.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there anything further?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Amanda, you'll just keep bringing them in as, we'll get back to you at the end. Once everyone's spoken, you'll be able to answer some of these. Yes, good evening. Take the podium, state your name and address for the record, and go ahead. You obviously have some questions or objections.
My name is Gordon Pellepuk, 17B Ellice.
Go ahead.
You know what, I like when there's progress and we can build more and all that, but my main concern is that on 17B Ellice there's so much traffic right now that I just can't see why we can't just drop everything and move it on someplace else or whatever, because there's just too much traffic there. And it's so close to the number 12 highway also that, you know, it's just, well, you guys know for yourself, it's just getting bigger and bigger, right? You know, you can only plan so much in a little space. And when it gets overcrowded, then, you know what, today it's good, you know what, and it's 4 years from now, then, you know what, we realize we made a mistake, right? So, you know, I hope you guys come up with the right decision, you know, to help correct the system there. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, take the podium, state your name and address, please.
My name is Emery Weeb, and I'm from 10 Ellice. We're on the same side as the proposed development, one house over, and there's a sidewalk in between our houses. I have a couple questions and some statements. My first question is, the site plan calls for a backyard of 30 feet. How does that fit in then with the one of the city's codes regarding building setback, having a common setback amongst all the buildings on a similar street, and that way there's no buildings set far back in the properties and other ones set right close to the property line or the front of the street.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, can I direct that question to you?
Yes, you may. I think if I understand your question correctly, there is a provision in the city's zoning bylaw that does talk about front yard building alignment. You made a reference to rear yard. However, that provision in the city zoning bylaw relates to the front yard building alignment, and an excerpt that I can read. It says, where a multifamily dwelling building or addition to a multifamily dwelling building is proposed within a street block or a portion of a street block, and the front yard required in the relevant zoning district is inconsistent with the existing front yards of a majority of the principal buildings in the street block, the new structure must be developed with a front yard consistent with the average. That pertains only to the front yard, and the required front yard setback for an RMD zone property is essentially very little different than what is existing on the street right now.
Okay. Just your question is the proposal is to have it set further back?
Yeah, looks like 93, the buildings start 93 plus the walkway from the front of the street. Our house sits 24 or 26, I think I measured it out to be. So then that would push this proposed development into essentially the backyards of the neighborhood that it is surrounding. So that would be an objection I would have to that. Is a variance required for, or does they is a parking lot considered part of the structure and count as the front yard as well?
Excuse me, your question should be directed to me, and then they'll go through me, they'll go to administration. Can you, go ahead with that answer?
The overall development, parking areas are not considered with respect to setback provisions. Setbacks pertain only to the structures that get built on the site. And when setbacks are required, the city's zoning bylaw deals only with minimums required. It does not set maximums.
Okay. So that's why there's a minimum of the 26 feet, but there's not a maximum.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, that would be one of my objections, that the building would be in essentially the backyard of everyone's property who lives in the nearby area. I guess, from what I can tell, the buildings don't really fit in our neighborhood. They don't fit in the lot. There'd be a parking lot in the front of the yard. That is inconsistent with the majority of the properties on the street. There's one other property that is completely single level, encompasses the entire lot. However, that one has a 6-foot fence and you really can't see it from the surrounding neighborhoods. So while there are other areas zoned RMD on Ellice, there are not any similar structures or similar proposals in our neighborhood. And I would like to, I guess, reiterate some of my concerns I've had with this design. I mean, the backyard privacy was one of them. Street parking, traffic is a concern. However, the width of our street is borderline wide enough to go 2 cars side by side plus a parked car. So while theoretically you could do it, most people don't. And as a result, if there is a parked car, people end up stopping and waiting for other people to pass. And if we add further street parking due to visitors and additional cars required by the rental units, that'll only further the problem. To compound matters even worse, there's a sidewalk going beside our yard, and there's a crosswalk there. It's hard to cross there. It's dangerous. Oftentimes, you're almost invisible. So that'd be a concern. Then you have vehicles turning onto Ellice, as well as other vehicles trying to pass parked cars. They probably won't notice this crosswalk, and I mean, people park within the 3-meter boundary often on there. Another aspect is the foot traffic across people's lawns. The most direct access from this particular property to the nearest green space, which is the park on Autumnwood, is across my neighbor's lawn. So the potential tenants would probably be traversing across her lawn to get to the sidewalk, to get to the green space, as opposed to crossing the street twice, which would, there'd be a big deterrence to that. I have a bit of concern with loss of property value regarding from the development, from increased crime to the building in the back of the yard, as well as having a parking lot for a neighbor. Those are some of our concerns with that. Yeah, the green space in the back, often like 30 feet, is it enough for 6 tenants? That could be debatable depending on if you get 4 families, that's not a whole lot of space. So then things start getting a little tight, stuff starts spilling over the property lines and into surrounding properties. And that would, I guess, conclude my objections to this.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any questions for the objector? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Quick question for administration while we're waiting for the next person.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, is it possible to get on the screen with the Google Maps that area so we can see where the homes are in terms of setbacks and all that? Is that something that would be easy to do, to pull that up and just zoom in on that area, and then we can see the homes along there and directly compare?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and then
Okay,
sort
that's
of,
good, that's good.
but if we could maybe, yeah, I could get in closer.
Okay, that gives a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we could have that available later, because maybe when the applicants are back up, there might be a question just on that. So just so that that screen is available. Okay.
Thank you. Take the podium, state your name and address, just for the record. Thank
Yeah.
you.
My name is Lisa Gretzinger. I live at 109 Autumnwood.
Okay.
As a longtime resident of Steinbach and this neighborhood, I would like to object to allowing the variance of a 6-unit being built on the property currently zoned residential low density. Ellice is a very busy street because it's currently the main access used by residents heading into that newer neighborhood located on Ellice west of Giesbrecht. My objection is about traffic congestion and the safety of children, students, pedestrians, cyclists, and other motorists already living in the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the number of residents who could occupy the property, how many drivers, how many cars per apartment versus how many parking spots are available, and where will they park a second vehicle, or where will their visitors park? The street already has a limited number of parking in that area due to the 5 duplexes across the street, all with double driveways. Add more parked cars and the safety of people using the nearby crosswalk on Ellice will be significantly compromised by all the congestion due to poor planning. This street is supposed to be a cycling-friendly street as well. Parked cars isn't very cycling-friendly. And what kind of residents are expected to occupy these units? Young families with small children. Children need access to green space. There are better locations to place medium-density housing than this very busy location. I am curious how many fender benders have occurred near the other multi or medium density at 26 and 28 Ellice and Westdale. That's probably a much wider lot, but I think that you can only expect more accidents with more congestion. Ellice is a school bus route, and when the school bus stops to let kids off and on, there's a lot of parents that actually drive their cars to pick their kids up from the bus. And I think that the whole street will be filled with parked cars. And that doesn't make it very friendly for emergency vehicles to access that area. And we're talking about summertime. Comes winter, and you add snowfall to this street and snowbanks. It's just not smart. The only positive that I see is that there's a fire hydrant already on the property. And my question would be also about the fire hydrant. How far from the hydrant do you have to have for parking so that the firemen can find the hydrant? As a healthcare professional, I ask you to please accept this letter as my opposition to this request in the name of safety for all. I would like to encourage you to deny this request because all lives do matter. Safety should be our #1 priority.
Thank you. Councillor, are there any questions for the objector? Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question of administration?
Yes, go ahead.
Through you. I noticed there, number 24, or it's RMD, it doesn't look like there's RMD on there. Is it just zoned RMD?
That's
right
correct.
now? Okay, so the zoning has changed, but there's not actual RMD on it.
Correct.
So if the person who owns that property wanted to put up RMD, they could just go ahead and do it as long as obviously it complies with the city. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor? I could also direct a question at administration.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. The other lots on that street that are been zoned RMD, do we know the width, or prior to the next reading, could we get the width of those? Are they all 71.5 or are they 75-foot lots?
Sorry, are you referring to all the lots on the street in general, or?
Yeah, well, there's a couple that have been RMD.
Correct.
I'm just wondering on the width of those lots.
Sure, I can get that information.
I could. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, take the podium, state your name and address.
My name is Pat Schrader.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm terrible at this. I live at number 12 Ellice.
okay, go ahead.
I object because I am in the process of developing my backyard as a place that I can have a summer retreat there, put up a gazebo, we have our fire pit there. It is someplace where I would like to entertain friends and family. And I feel that with that other building set far back like that, the privacy will be completely gone. A big concern I have is I am right beside the crosswalk. There is no sidewalk on my side of the street. So anyone, we all know what children do, not only children. I've got people with bikes already crossing my yard. I can foresee a nice path right across my yard. And who could I go to in a situation like that? Is that something that I could come see you people from the city about? Or is that something that I would have to go to the developer? Or is there nothing that I can do in a situation like that? And there too, we have a nice quiet neighborhood with a sixplex like that. We have no idea how many people could potentially be in a sixplex. And will our neighborhood stay a quiet neighborhood? That is a concern. I have a grandchild on the way who I am hoping will spend a lot of time at my house. And so, yeah, then it becomes a concern.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, through you. Is it the height of the building? If there was a multifamily, but it was one story, does that make a difference to
If
you?
they were proposing a side-by-side or something like that, like they have on the other properties across the street, I agree that I think there is housing needed in the city, but I don't think that that is the best property for that big a complex.
But thank you, I understand. But for you personally, is the height the big issue?
Yes, the height is definitely an issue.
Okay, and then the next question I have, does a fence make a difference to you if there's a fence or no fence?
How is the fence ever as high as a two-story building?
No, obviously it wouldn't be as high, but,
So that, like.
so it is the height that's.
Yes, it is the height.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Take the podium, state your name and address.
Sure. My name's Marlena Gunther, and I live at 113 Autumnwood Drive.
Okay, thank
This is
you.
the property right behind 14 Ellice.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So I did also send in a letter to you on behalf of my husband and me, stating our objections to this proposal, especially as the house directly behind, and considering about 30 feet from our back fence to the end of the building, as has already been mentioned. The green space, what kind of green space will there be? Putting, as Pat had mentioned, a duplex or something like that, there's a lot less families. Putting 6 potential families, we don't know the number of people that will be in this unit. Will it all be just 1 or 2 people per unit? Is it going to be families? That is a very small space to be able to fit potentially 6 families. And with our fence, we do have a fence there, but as was mentioned before, trying to fit potentially a lot of people in a small space. It's really close to our property. There's going to be increased noise. There's going to be increase of potential disturbances. With that, my husband and I are starting a family. We have concern about the number and also the potential type of people that tend to live in lower income rentals. 1 or 2, it can be managed when you have a lot of people in a small space where this is a narrower lot already, and then again with that back space, trying to fit 2 buildings in a narrower spot, and then that tiny little bit in the back certainly is a concern. Safety-wise, a lot of people that we have noticed in places with lower income rentals, there is a lot more loitering around, and that could be right in our backyard, looking into our backyard as our kids are playing, and that's a safety concern as well as what was mentioned. Privacy-wise, it is nice to hear that there are not the 3-story building with balconies facing our backyard. Certainly, even with that too, the proposed plan with just on the main floor, that does make a difference. It's still not ideal because, again, of the number of people. It's better because we're really close to that building then. And if people are there, if we have our windows open and in the night, the lights are on, it will feel like we're more in, our space is invaded. There is also, as was mentioned already, a potential decline in property value. With our building or our house being directly behind that, people looking at our house will see what we have worked really hard towards for the last 6 years, making our house a home. And if they come and look, beautiful house, come to the backyard, and now there's these 2 massive buildings, even if it's 2-story, it is still 2 buildings really close to our backyard, and I believe that will be a downside for our potential property value. And along with property value, as was already mentioned, and even regardless of that, is a potential increase in crime. With us as well being right beside the sidewalk, if you leave your cars open, they will get rifled through. That's just a fact of more people, more crime. There has been theft, there has been vandalism. Our fences, we set them up, and people have broken them. With more people, more crime, and as well with lower income housing, there is potential for there to be more people that tend to do those things. Not to say that always happens, but it certainly is a possibility. Another thing as well, it is one thing to purposely buy a house next to big buildings, next to multi-unit dwellings, knowing full well there's going to be increased traffic, there's going to be increased people around, all of that. We bought our house because we love the neighborhood. It was settled, these homes are older, people have been there for years, raised their families, it is a quieter neighborhood. We really value that, and this is why we chose this spot. There wasn't a big multi-unit dwelling, and that's why we chose it. We would never have intentionally bought a house right behind a multi-unit dwelling if we could help it. I believe others would do the same in trying to buy our house, as I already mentioned. And so for us, we also feel like having this all of a sudden built in our backyard essentially is just not what we would have chosen. And with all the areas, all the properties being sold around Steinbach and area, we had our pick. We could have picked next to a place, and we chose specifically the quiet, settled neighborhood as well to raise a family, and trying to avoid the big traffic areas, trying to avoid lots of people, and this certainly will make a big change to that. I mean, lots of this has already been mentioned: privacy, noise, increased crime, decrease in property value, increased traffic. One of the things, and we couldn't hear what was mentioned from the developers about what their plan was with the water. Couldn't hear any of it. It was brought up a little bit as well. The idea is that it will run to the street. Currently, we can look over our fence and see like this much water at least. Right up to our property line. And my concern is that even though the intention might be for it to go to the street, that it will end up coming onto our yard, at least partially, which we have worked, just as Pat, the next door neighbor, has in building up our lawn, building up, making a great space. And there's potential for that to come into our area. And what was mentioned, it should go to Brant Street, but as we might have seen if you would have traveled down Brant Street during our massive rain we had a few weeks ago, people were stalled on the street. That water had no place to go. So that isn't necessarily a good place for the water to end up going. Yeah, I mean, we echo everything that has been already mentioned. We do not want this building there. We don't want to look into our backyard and see this building. We don't want to go through the big construction as well, as our little one will spend the first year of its life with that, and then also the extra noise after that and the safety concerns. But I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Any questions of council? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Marilena. That's it? Okay. I'd like to, at this time, give some time to the applicant to answer some of these objections or questions that were given. So if you want to take the podium, please.
Okay, wow. We're not quite prepared for all of those objections, but as we mentioned earlier, we did do a lot of researching, we did a lot of canvassing, we checked the rezoning requirements, we addressed the parking space requirements. As you can see from our plan, yes, there are 6 units there. We have provided 9, 10 parking spots. Okay. More than adequate for what the requirements are. We don't know what type of tenants might be moving in there. That's something we can't tell you. Is it going to be a single person? Is it going to be somebody with a family? Will it be this? Will it be that? We don't know. What we can say is we have addressed that as well. From the site plan, we've allowed for a large green space behind the property. And that is space for children to play. That is space for families to hang out. There could be picnic tables there. There could be all kinds of stuff that we could put in there to allow for children and tenants to hang out so that they're not taking up space or whatnot. Snow removal, yes, we have allowed ourselves an allowance for that. That is definitely a requirement regardless that the snow needs to be removed. So that will be put into place. Again, with the parking space, people parking on the street, we have allowed spots for that. We have allowed extra spots for visitor parking as well. I would like to make this very clear. This is not a low-income housing project. I am not sure where that's come from. It's been addressed repeatedly tonight. All that we have said is we want to make this affordable. affordable is different than low-income housing. So we are just trying to stay in line with that for people who are looking for, maybe they can't afford a $1,400 per month rental property or whatnot. So we are working on that. The green space requirement, again, we mentioned previously that we are definitely wanting to keep as many trees there as possible. We have the green space in the back of the property, and we want to keep up with the city requirements for the landscaping as well, so that there's adequate trees, adequate shrubs, etc. The water flow I want to address as well. We recognize there is an existing issue there with water drainage on the property. We realized that actually in spring, a few months ago. So that is when my husband took measurements, and if you want to clarify what those measurements are, at that time as well, he did discover there was a clogged pipe on the property, which was kind of hard to spot, but he cleared that drainage issue up, and then after that happened, a lot of the water flow did come toward the street. So that may have been a part of the issue previously. I can't promise you that, but we do promise you that we are planning on addressing that issue. And if you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, I work for a local general contractor, so I'm very well versed in redevelopment and stuff. I know how the drainage is going to have to work. I'm going to have to work with a civil engineer to manage our water on our site, whether it's grading or retention walls. But as everybody had mentioned, anybody had looked in our backyard in spring, we are the low spot, and they had rectified their lots by lifting their yards up. So obviously, we had the swimming pool in the backyard there. And then when I had walked around and done the shots in the yard there, I had found this drainage pipe, which I guess the previous owner had tried to rectify to try and help drain that low spot in the backyard. But regardless of that, if this goes forward, like you say, we'll be working with the engineering department to make sure that we manage our water ourselves and bring it all to the street as it's supposed to do there. So.
Also, a lot of these concerns that are addressed, they end up being covered in requirements by the city for what we're proposing to build. So drainage needs to be addressed, landscaping, green space, enough adequate parking, all those things, we've covered it off. So my last comment about that was the height of the building and privacy. We heard that over and over from the immediate surrounding neighbors. And again, we did address that with switching over from the 3-story layout to a 2-story layout. Also, regarding the height of the property, if you check the surrounding area, the neighbor, the backyard neighbor who has a 2-story property, we addressed that with that neighbor at the time who had made that comment and clarified that the height of this building is 5 feet higher than the backyard neighbor. 5 feet. That's it. That's not very high. That's not a very tall building. And also, it's not 2 massive buildings. So we don't believe that that is a major concern here. Other than that, we feel we have done our homework. We feel that we have addressed all the concerns, covered it all off. We heard all of these concerns previously and did try to address them up front at the time, and we still are going ahead with our proposal at this time. Thank you.
Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question, it's either for the applicant or administration. If we could go back to the street view, and do we have a pointer or whatever? I'd like to see indicated at number 14 the setback in terms of compared to the houses along there. Can you indicate on that map approximately where the new building would start. I want to compare the setback between 12 and 18 and like how far back it goes. Like with that arrow, can we indicate about how far back the building would be compared to the current building?
Are you talking about from the backyard? Sorry.
I'm from the front. I want to see how much, how well or how not well it lines up with the houses along there, because that is one of the factors that we look at. And if we could see visually in terms of what the 30-foot looks like in the back, but I'm thinking mainly of the front. I'm thinking of the front alignment.
Well, their proposal is 30.
Technology is an amazing thing.
That's true.
Just go with the measuring tool in Esri.
No pressure. Yeah, no problem. So it starts.
So that's where it would start? Yeah. Okay.
And then can you go 30, like what's 30 feet from the back?
35.
35 from the back, okay.
Okay. Does that give you an idea?
Yep, that's good. That's what I needed.
Okay. Anything further?
Actually,
Yes, follow-up question?
yeah, this is specifically to the applicants. Do you believe that the structure you're proposing to build fits the general character of the neighborhood? And if so, why?
We did the best to fit the neighborhood. It's obviously a new development or new zoning. But I guess with the other RMD lots that have been rezoned in there, if they would propose something next week, I'm sure it'd be similar. So I guess we're kind of, setting the bar for that. But like we had mentioned, we had came up with 2 proposals, and this is the plan that seemed to check the most boxes and fit into the neighborhood as best we could.
If I can add to that, we also think this is actually an improvement to this neighborhood. If you look at this house, specifically 14 Ellice Avenue, it's not in the best condition. It has water drainage problems, and I can go on and on and on about that. So by erecting this property here, we do feel that it is an improvement, and again, it's addressing a concern. It's addressing a concern here that we need to provide more rental properties in Steinbach.
Thank you. Anything further, council? Okay, I'll have you take a seat. Well, council, I will close the public hearing, open the council meeting, and council, how would you like to proceed? Councilor Swagstra?
I'll make a motion to deny.
I'll second it.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In any application like this, when you have an existing neighborhood, we always look at these things on a case-by-case basis. And we look at a number of factors. We look at the plan that's presented, we look at the reaction of the neighborhood, And a key thing is we consider how well does the proposed development fit the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood and such. And there are some significant challenges with the plan that's proposed. I appreciate the fact that the applicants have done their best to address many of the concerns, and that the plan they're proposing would be 2-story as opposed to 3-story. That is certainly better than putting a 3-story there. But as we saw on the map just a moment ago, one of the setback from the front is substantial. And I agree with some of the concerns that were raised that by moving the building so far back and putting the parking lot in the front, not only is that not very appealing aesthetically to have sort of buildings sideways, sort of far in the back, but you're basically are taking that building and putting it beside backyards as opposed to beside other buildings. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that we do have an infill policy in the city, that any plan that's proposed that gets a rezoning in an existing neighborhood has to go through a careful staff review. And I don't see how that would pass the infill policy because it doesn't fit as far as matching the other homes. The alignment doesn't match. I recognize that across the street and like nearby, there are some properties that are zoned RMD, but they're developed as duplexes, and that's what it is now. And yes, someone could come along and redevelop those and change that, but that hasn't happened. And when you go to the area and you take a look, I don't see the same level of transition that you might in some areas where you have, for example, a long list of single-family homes on these massively big lots that are crying out for some sort of redevelopment. Rather, I see, for the most part, regular homes along with some duplexes, and this is a significant change. And so, when you consider how it would change the look, how it doesn't line up in the front, and how far it goes in the back, I think that I'm not comfortable with the rezoning. And then you add to it the fact that we would have to do a variance to even rezone it RMD. The variance itself isn't my main concern. We've approved variances of that nature before. But when you have these concerns from the neighborhood and that it doesn't match, and to even work as RMD, it has to get a variance, those are a lot of red flags all put together that would make me say, no, I don't think the rezoning fits for this particular property.
Anything further?
Further to what Deputy Mayor Swagster said, I agree with what he said, and I'm not going to reiterate what he said, but I'd also like to thank you for presenting today, and thank you to the citizens from the street and the area that attended here today with their concerns. Appreciate that. I am concerned with a large number of concerns that were brought up here, as well as the petition. As stated, does this fit into the neighborhood? When we saw the plan up there and we look, the front of the building, and if I'm correct, would start behind buildings on either side. That is, I can't imagine having a building behind my house of rentals. And I think that is a huge concern for the people on either side, and also the people in the back. One of the comments that was made by the presenters that this was the third lot from highway number 12. That may have been error. I believe it's the fifth lot from highway number 12. As council knows, one of my objections in the past has been an area that we transition. Are we transitioning from the outside, or are we trying to put something into the middle of a block? I don't see this as a transitioning. It's not starting near number 12, it's 5 lots in, and for those reasons, I have great concerns about this.
Thank you. Anything further of council? Councillor Penner?
Thank you. I would just like to comment. I'm not opposed to the RMD. I think there's other examples of RMD in that neighborhood. However, the plan is too aggressive for the comments stated in terms of, I think 6 is a lot to put on that property. And then in terms of trying to configure it, it's virtually impossible with 6 units to configure that property in a way that allows it to tie into the neighborhood. So RMD makes sense to me, but because of the plan that was presented, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do commend the efforts that the developers went through to address a lot of the issues in terms of parking. Yes, they fit the amount of parking that's required for the 6 units. Traffic with Woodhaven being extended and Lund being extended, we don't know exactly how the traffic flow will be affected in the future. You addressed the setback, you'd fit it in within the parameters, but to reiterate Councillor Penner's comments, it is a little bit too aggressive for this lot in this neighborhood. You did a great job making what you wanted to work fit, but I just feel like it's not quite the fit for the lot or the development or the neighborhood. So for that reason, I will also be supporting the motion.
Go ahead, Councillor Seaman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I think there's a lot of different issues here. I agree with Councillor Penner. This is the next logical space with a large lot in our community. We have this ongoing where we have large lots and it's communities in transition. And we've seen it on First Street, we've seen it on Maplewood, we've seen it in various different areas where what do you do with a large, deep lots like we have in all these communities where when these homes were built, everybody built large lots so that they could have a big garden to raise their own food. And that just doesn't happen anymore. So now, as these areas transition, what happens in here? And so now we have a request for to change to an RMD. I agree that it is a bit aggressive for that size lot. I walked that lot. I've taken a look at it. And that community in that area, I agree with the presenters that that area is in transition. There will be more requests for RMD or changes in that area, whatever that looks like. I do have major concerns with the water. They can address the water on that property as it says in our development agreement. The problem with our development agreement and with our water problem, standing water, is the fact that they can solve the issue on their property, but it might get pushed to other properties, and that'll just extend it. And the city does wash their hands of it somewhat because it's all private property. So I don't know how to address that either, but we've seen that in other low areas and other older neighborhoods where there hasn't been a development plan in place when those homes were built. So that's also a concern I have ongoing about individual buildings on various lots. I'll agree with the motion at this point, but I would like to also recommend their foresight and the plan that they did have. It is a bit aggressive. Potentially, I do appreciate the neighborhood that they came out and spoke. I don't agree with some of the things that were said. Traffic, as Councillor Damian Penner indicated, traffic will be somewhat, I think, relaxed on Ellice once the Lund-Woodhaven extension goes through. That gives people in that area another option to enter and access the area at the end of Ellice Avenue. I think this is a tough decision, but I think this is the correct one at this point.
Anything in closing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to make clear, I think the main issue here again is that when you're talking about 6 units and you have a lot that's relatively narrow like this one, I just don't see any way that 6 units can be configured in a way that reasonably fits into the surrounding neighborhood and would pass our infill policy that we have and that we try to enforce. And so for that reason, because of setbacks and all that, I just don't think that it works.
Thank you. Well, Council, this is a difficult decision. And I just want to thank the developer for coming forward. It was a good presentation. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the neighborhood for coming out, because without the neighborhood, we don't know what everyone's thinking. I don't have a problem with the RMD. The zoning part, I'm okay with that. And even the variance later on, I could easily do that. My challenge is to, very much like what other councillors said, I just want to echo them. I do feel that at this time, it's a little aggressive with the sizing, and I don't know how you can I mean, there's all kinds of ways to develop and all kinds of ways to format this property, but if it could come into a little more compliance with our infill policy, that would be great. Because I do believe this area is due, or it's on its way in a transition. And as far as the traffic concerns go, well, I don't think 10 cars is gonna make that much of an issue. I mean, eventually, if every property adds 10 cars, yes, that will be definitely a traffic issue, and we'll deal with it at that time. But right now, for that reason, I will support the motion at this time, and hope that, I would like to encourage you as a developer to revisit this, rework this, and bring it back to us so that we can look at a new plan. Okay? Thank you. Okay, council, call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, then we will not be visiting the variance at this time. We will go to 6C. This is By-Law 2153, the Woodhaven Avenue rezoning. Council, it starts on page 26 in your agenda. Mr. Workington, could you please introduce this file?
Yes, this is an application for rezoning under By-Law 2153 for lots with civic address of 216 and 220 Woodhaven Avenue. Owner of the properties is Two New Properties Ltd. The application, or the applicant of the rezoning, is Andreas Hart. Purpose of the application is to rezone the two subject properties from RHD residential high density to RMD residential medium density. This is for purposes of proposed development on the sites. Notices as required under the Planning Act have been issued. There are no written pieces of correspondence on the file. Recommendation from administration is that City Council give By-Law 2153 second and third readings.
Thank you. I would like to, at this time, close the council meeting, open the public hearing. Is the applicant here today? Would you like to take the podium, please? Would you like to take the podium? Do you have something to say? Please state your name and address, please.
My name is Waldemar Hart. And what needed you?
And your address?
It's box 59, Marchand, Manitoba, R0A0Z0.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I have to present, right? Ah, that's right, it's right there. Good, we are planning on building two 21-unit apartment buildings on Woodhaven there, on the two marked properties, with combined parking lot, one way in and one way out. That is the plan there. And we would like to, because it is zoned at high density at this point, and we would like to rezone it to a medium density, so we can, it's going to be different setbacks, but so we can have a larger building, yeah, but less levels. It's just going to be a 3-story.
Council, any questions on that? Okay, at this time you can, if that's all you have, at this time you take a seat.
Good.
And is there anyone here with questions or objections to this file? Thank you. You have to bear with us. It takes a little longer with the COVID process. No? Okay, I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone here with objections or questions to this file? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing, open the council meeting. Council, how would you like to proceed? Council Siemens.
Motion to approve.
Second, Council Penner. Okay, go ahead, Councilor Siemens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not often that we get a request to rezone from high density to medium density. It's usually the other way around, as they look to put more space on. In this case, one of the prime reasons for asking to go from high density to medium density is that their footprint can be a little bit bigger. for the area, but that also reduces it to a 3-story building. It fits into that area. There's also a buffer on the backyard to buffer the people living on Whitby Crescent. So maybe that's why they're not here objecting. So they do stand back. This is a new area. They have a park to the south of them, and the new Lund Road is one lot over, but it is also there, and it's a new area. So I think it fits in that area.
Anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that when individuals take the time and effort to put in applications for buildings that are going to be fitting in the area, that we allow them, as long as they're fitting within all of our bylaws, and that they have the freedom to do with their properties as they choose to see fit. So reducing from a high density to a medium density obviously is kind of the backwards away from where we normally see, but obviously understood as well to maximize what you're wanting to do with it. I don't see any issues with this.
Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
Sure.
Okay. Well, council, yes, this is something that doesn't usually happen, just like our last public hearing was about increasing density. This is about decreasing density. But I see how this is going to work. This is, it brings the setbacks a little closer, can have a bigger building, but you also have a lower roof, which is going to fit better into the neighborhood, which at this point. So, so I will support the motion on this. Council, call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay. We will then, second.
Recommendation is also that
For
council
third
make a
reading?
third reading, correct.
Okay, we need a Councillor Siemens, second by Councillor Penner. Any comments?
Further?
Nothing further? Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay. Thank you, council. We have no delegations. We have no reports and recommendations of the city manager, so we'll go to 9C, the building permits on page 41. We'll start. Council, we've had an excellent month. We're sitting presently now, year-to-date, at almost $22.8 million, which brings us quite equal to last year at this time. So I think we bounced back quite well from our slow start, and then the whole COVID shutdown, and I think we're bouncing back very nicely. Just a couple of highlights. We've got one. The biggest permit was $7.1 million for a 45-unit multiplex on Penfield Drive. So we've got many multifamily units coming in. We also we've increased our backyard pool inventory of our city by 6 this month. Perfect year for it. Can't go away, so might as well bring the playground home. The council, we're looking for a motion to approve. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Hebert. Any comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that as we are hearing, I guess, in the news, people are investing in their homes. There's a lot of projects going on in terms of basements being refinished, decks being built, pools being put in, and I think that's, that's really exciting that people are finding a way, to invest in their own properties this summer.
Let's don't move, improve.
Well, there you go. I've never heard that, but that makes sense.
Anything further?
As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, the one building is permit is $7.1 million. But I think we also have to note that there were quite a few, I should have counted them, but there's a page and a half of other people that have also applied for permits for a total of $2.5 million. So that's exciting.
Yeah, very exciting.
Thank you.
Okay. Call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We got 9D, Subdivision 4451-2020, 8259, the Condominium Bear Land, RE 286 Park Road West. Mr. Workney, could you please introduce this file?
Yes, the application for subdivision is, as noted, at 286 Park Road West. with the application seeking to create a 15-unit industrial condominium development along with a common element at the subject property. The subject parcel is 1.66 acre site zoned as M1 light industrial. Recommendation for council is to approve the subdivision subject to a development agreement.
Hey, Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Swagstra?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion to approve.
Second by Councillor Penner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as has been explained, this is an industrial zoned, light industrial zoned property, and being subdivided into 15 condominium units, and then hence treated as and common area and such. And this is common in a number of industrial areas, and it's a way of making it easier for businesses to locate there and to expand. So I think we should go ahead and approve.
Any further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A big part of economic development, which is something we all campaigned on, is making sure that our industrial inventory is adequate. So this is a good addition to the city, and I'm glad that it's moving forward.
Any further? Go ahead, Councillor Siemens.
One comment is, as we get more and more commercial industrial development on Park Road, it's going to put pressure on us to develop that road.
Anything further of council? Anything in closing?
No.
Yes, council, this is good news. When we have industrial development going on, and these are condominiums. So the developer is building 1,200-ish square foot industrial condos where, it can incubate businesses, or a business that's a home-based business working out of a garage can now expand into something bigger, into a commercial space. And I think this is really exciting that there's actually need for this in our community. For 15, that's quite a bit. That could be up to 15 businesses. Okay, council, call for the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do we have any questions of council? Okay, seeing none. We have number 11A. We have correspondence and petitions. We have a letter from Evangelical Fellowship Church. 3, the basketball court request. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Swagstra?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's an interesting proposal, in specifically what the church is offering to do is they're saying that there's some challenges with where they have the existing basketball hoop because of the development along Woodhaven, and they're raising the question of, if they were to donate the hoop, is there the potential of the city putting in a pad nearby and taking that? And so I'm just wondering, is that something that we could forward to our recreation director, Russ Dick? Is it something that would come back to council? I think it should be looked at. I think it should get due consideration, but I'm pretty open as to what the best way to look at it is, but we should consider.
Okay, Mr. Warkentine, is that something we can pass on to our Parks and Rec department manager?
I could do so, and it could be reviewed along with all the other parks amenities reviews that are done as part of the annual budgeting process.
Okay, council?
That's acceptable.
Are you guys okay? Are the council's consensus to do that?
Yeah, that's the idea as well.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Warkentine, will you take care of that and pass that on?
I will forward that on.
Thank you very much. We have no other business. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Siemens, second by Councillor Penner. Call for the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Next regular council meeting is Tuesday, September 1st, 2020, 7:30 p.m.